I'm to follow God, not because I want the life that I want, or I want him to bless my life, or use him as like a sanctioning tool for my decisions.
Mm-hmm.
But I have to follow God when it sucks, because he's God. Welcome to the Uncut Podcast. I'm Pastor Luke.
And I am Pastor Cameron.
And this is the Uncut Podcast, where we're honest, uncut conversations about faith, life, and ministry.
Welcome back to the studio.
Yep.
That's what we're calling it now.
Yep, the studio.
The studio. It's no longer just the room that we do the podcast in. Because we've got lights.
We got lights. We're official now.
Yeah. It is a vibe.
Mm-hmm.
It feels nice in here.
Yeah.
Thank you for doing all this. Hard work.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
It's fun hard work, though.
It is maybe it represents one of the fun parts of there's lots of fun parts of ministry, but one of the fun things we get to do.
Yeah.
So
those who watch us on YouTube don't have to, maybe we don't look quite as pasty anymore. Maybe it's slightly better, more appealing to watch now.
Yeah.
Not that we've gotten more beautiful or anything like that, but
and today we're matching in our outfits.
We are.
Black hoodies for both of us.
Yep.
You got your Conduit hoodie on.
That's right.
We do have a merch store at conduitministries.com.
Yep. We don't have any uncut stuff there yet.
No, we don't.
But we could eventually.
Yeah.
But
that would be, we could have stuff there.
We could.
Yeah.
Yeah. But if you're part of the Conduit community and you want some stuff, want some swag.
Yeah.
People call it swag anymore.
I don't know.
But
Sherry wondered if people call it merch anymore.
Well, what do they call it?
I don't know.
Somebody in the comments, let us know what we're supposed to call it.
Right.
But we got some mugs and hoodies and things like that. If you buy a hoodie, buy a size up.
Buy a size up.
Buy a size up. We're learning that the hard way. So
yeah. Mm-hmm.
But
anyway, yeah, here we are. So if you don't listen on YouTube or watch on YouTube, pop over there and even just check out the difference between episodes that we have done before and ones that we're doing now.
Yep.
So, well, it's the Advent season.
It is.
We are officially in Advent season this year, which seems unreal. December. We're in December.
Yeah.
And because Thanksgiving was late this year, Advent was also late this year. But Advent is a season.
Yeah, because people outside the church don't say Advent.
They say Christmas.
Christmas. I would even wager that there's a good amount of churches that don't even say Advent. They say Christmas too.
Yeah.
So you might be like, what's Advent? Or maybe you have a sense of what Advent is, but.
Right.
Yeah.
I had a seminary professor who was kind of like an old church guy. And he was very passionate about the church that he led. He was also a pastor. The church that he led during the Advent season, he would not sing Christmas carols. And he said it was a really big pain point for his church.
I bet that bugged a lot of people.
Because Advent, in like the classic liturgical sense, is the period
before Christmas.
Before Christmas, it is the waiting. It is the anticipation. It is the coming of the Christ.
Right, and then Christmas was more than a day as well.
It was 12 days.
12 days. That's 12 days of Christmas is not the 12 days leading up to Christmas. It's the 12 days of Christmas.
Yes.
We shortchange ourselves in how we celebrate Christmas.
We do.
Nowadays.
We do. And then there's even there's an additional liturgical season after Christmas, season of Epiphany, which marks or is supposed to mark the coming of the wise men.
Yep.
To visit Jesus and Mary and Joseph, which is also something that we don't celebrate.
Right.
So, if you're in high church,
yep.
So that would be like Catholic,
Anglican, Lutheran.
Anglican, some Lutherans.
Some Anglicans.
And some Anglicans. I don't know about the Orthodox. Do you know?
Yeah.
Do you know, like, are they following that type of liturgical calendar? I don't know enough about them.
It's similar. It doesn't line up. So like it doesn't, I think like the days are different, or I know they're definitely different for Easter. I know Orthodox Easter is on a different week than everybody else.
That's right.
Don't remember if the same is true for Christmas or not, and I don't remember if they call it Advent or if it's something else. But it's analogous though. The structure is analogous similarly. So
yeah, okay. Yeah. So if you are in any of those traditions, you likely do celebrate maybe a little bit more closely those seasons than modern Protestantism does.
Yeah. At least your liturgy, your Sunday liturgy will reflect that more. You'll have this idea of Advent and then Christmas, and that being kind of more than just one singular day or Sunday, and that kind of the things that happen after that. And that's what Advent is this idea of waiting for Christmas to come. So even calling it the Christmas season is a little bit, it's misleading if you're following that traditional calendar.
Yeah, 'cause the word Advent comes from the Latin word adventus.
Yep.
Which means coming.
Yep.
Right?
Or arrival.
Or
happening or something like that.
Yeah, so the whole season is based around this sense of waiting.
Yep.
Like waiting for something to come. And it's not really I guess it's more of like, it's not a something.
Yeah, it's someone.
It's a someone, right? The coming of the Messiah. And so because we're in Advent and we're preaching on Advent and we're thinking about Advent, we thought we would take maybe a few episodes even.
Yeah.
And just talk on those themes, the themes of waiting, of expectation, of coming, and just see where it takes us.
Yeah. What would you say? Like, I think this is a bigger conversation when we get closer to like Easter, because when we've done some acknowledgement or celebration of Lent in our church, and Lent and Ash Wednesday, those in particular tend to have a little bit more. People tend to have a little bit more baggage with those if they grew up in a very non-denom, low church, not a whole lot of, it can feel like, isn't this too Catholic? I don't think we get that as much when we celebrate Advent because it's Christmas.
Yeah, right.
But like, what would you say to someone who's just like, you're using this Latin word, it's Advent, like, are you guys just Protestants or are you guys just Catholics pretending to be non-denominational preachers for some reason? Like, what's going on? Like,
yeah, I mean, of course, like an argument could always be made that we're just fighting over definitions.
Yeah.
We're just fighting over like who gets the right to describe, who gets the right to name the season that we're in and what is the season all about.
Yeah.
Because if you were to take a person who was saying something like that, like, well, why are you using this Latin word? What are you trying to be Catholic or whatever? And you got down into what they were really upset about or what they were really questioning. It wouldn't be about they wouldn't be questioning the celebration of the season. Like, we shouldn't celebrate the season.
Right. Because it's likely, I don't know. I guess I'm having a picture of somebody in my mind, like not someone specific, but I'm just kind of attributing some attributes. I'm wagering that the type of person might also be, kind of like, yeah, let's not take Christ out of Christmas. Like, don't like, it's all about Jesus. Like, not talking to someone who's anti-Jesus, anti-Christ, like is all about Jesus, would, would be alongside of just like, let's not make it Xmas. Let's make it Christmas or whatever.
Let me make it Christosmas.
Christosmas. I heard that argument when I was in high school, is that the X is more close to the Greek for Christ, and so is a more accurate keeping Christ in Christmas. But anyways, so yeah, like we say Advent in our church, and we celebrate Advent, but we also like say Christmas and things like that. But like other churches, like if you go to pretty much any church right now, they're doing a Christmas sermon series.
Yep.
They've got something that's Christmas themed. They've decorated it.
Yeah.
We're just calling it Advent.
Yeah. I think, well, one of the reasons that I like to maintain that language is because I think that the theme of waiting, the theme of like the anticipation of God coming, or his deliverance, or his arrival, or his presence, or his promises, or whatever, is not just relegated to the Christmas story.
Yeah.
It's not just a Luke chapter 2 theme. It feels to me like we could make the argument that the theme of Advent is a theme that starts in Genesis 3, where at the fall, God is already foreshadowing or forecasting, however you want to call it.
Yeah.
He's already foreshadowing the deliverance that will come through Christ.
Yeah. That passage you're talking about is often called the Proto-Evangelion.
Right.
And is, God gives the curse, but then he gives this small little promise that's sandwiched in there, right? He says, there will come a descendant of Eve, who will rise up, who will crush the serpent's head.
Yep.
But the serpent will strike his heel.
Yep.
And that is considered by theologians for many, many centuries to have referred to the eventual coming of Christ.
Right. So I don't know. It feels to me, tell me what you think, that like all of humanity after the Proto-Evangelion, all of humanity is looking towards this moment where the Messiah comes, where the deliverer comes. And so all of creation looks towards it, actually. And so all of the Old Testament is Advent. The whole Old Testament is like the season of Advent.
Yeah.
Where's the Messiah? Where's the Messiah? Where's the deliverer? Where's the deliverer? Right. Where's the one that will make all things right?
Yep. And
then I guess you could be like, well, okay, the New Testament comes and Jesus is there. Okay, we don't need to wait anymore. We don't need to celebrate Advent anymore. But Jesus himself, before he ascended back into heaven after the resurrection, was like, wait for my return.
Yes.
I'm coming back. Look for my return.
Right.
Live as though I'm returning. Because I am. And so there's only like two like little blips of non-Advent life. In the garden before the fall. And during the earthly ministry of Jesus.
Right. Like when Christ is saying, like, why would they fast when the bridegroom is with them?
Right.
But there will be a day when they will fast.
Exactly.
When I am no longer here.
Exactly. Yeah. So you're talking about two little blips of time in biblical history where humanity is not in some season of Advent. So I want to celebrate Advent. I want to still use that term because I think it is a major and significant meta-narrative in Scripture.
Yeah. I think there's definitely a way in which you can read the Old Testament, and if you just look at the chosen son like theme in the patriarchs and the Old Testament, and Abraham's almost sacrifice of Isaac. You can even go to there's a small blip where Moses even offered to sacrifice himself for a moment. There's all these places where there's these different images of the chosen son, the chosen seed, and then there's the chosen king through and then all of that is all supposed to be creating a sense of drama of like, is this the chosen king? Is this the chosen seed? Is this the chosen son? And the answer always ends up being no. Even if they're really great, like Moses or something like that, they still somehow fall short of being the one who crushes the serpent head until that gets answered in the Gospels. But then you see that same Advent language being used by Paul when he begins to say all of creation is in groaning and longing. It's in the pains of childbirth until its redemption, the redemption of our bodies, our souls, and all of creation up in Christ's second coming. There is this, I don't know where this term like specifically originated. So it either originated with Arthurian legends, so legends to do with like King Arthur and the Round Table, the Knights, Camelot, all that, or it may have originated with Christ and then was co-opted and used in that, used in those legends. I don't know which one came first or where it came from, but I know that there is this one of the collection of the Arthurian legends is called the Once and Future King. It's this idea of King Arthur embodies, he was the King of England, and so he once was the king, and then he will be the future King of England, so as much as every monarch or king embodies those virtues and the essence of King Arthur. I saw a book, and it was titled The Once and Future Coming of Christ. And I was like, I really, really like that idea, because Christ has come already, but is also coming again. And is coming into our hearts every single day. Every day that we open ourselves up and invite God into our day-to-day life, there's an invitation for him to be present and dwell among us and for us to abide in him. So I love that really poetic language of the once and future coming of Christ, because it wraps up that fact that we're celebrating that Christ did come, but then we're also hearkening to the fact that Christ will come again.
Right. And I think in Advent celebration, or in the, I don't know, the problem is that we only talk about Advent once a year.
Yeah.
And so when you do talk about Advent only once a year during the Christmas season, then it feels like, well, there's so much that you could unpack about the huge theme of Advent in biblical history, pre-Jesus, but also every bit of hope that we have, every bit of hope that we have is hope in the midst of Advent. It's hope for the future coming of Christ. It's hope for our eternal salvation. It's hope for our, the redemption of our circumstances and of our souls. And so what I was going to say is that one of the things that leaves me wanting more during the Advent season is to also preach specifically on, or talk, more specifically on the second Advent, to more fully root Advent as a comprehensive biblical theme, rather than just like a Luke 2. type of theme.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe that's what we need to do. Maybe we need to have an Advent series.
Next year's going to be on Revelation.
In July.
Advent.
Yeah. You have an Advent series in July.
Mm-hmm.
And you make people really confused.
Yeah.
About like, what? Wait a second.
Advent in July.
Yeah. Pull out the Advent wreath. Light some Advent candles. Yeah. And I mean, maybe like intentionally use the oddity of the season
mm-hmm.
to paint a really comprehensive picture.
Yeah. I think because it's, you can get really caught up in the like rehearsal of the first coming of Christ, the Luke 2, Christ being born, Mary, Bethlehem, the stable, all that stuff. And I think what that, like part of that rehearsing, and one of the reasons I like using the more traditional terms and leaning into church history and church tradition, is I like to know that we're participating in something that the church has been doing for a long time, that we're kind of retelling the same story, and that the story is ultimately meant to not just remind us of what has happened, but get us to be in a place where we can see how that was experienced and then overlay our own weighting on top of the story. So that we're like, because there is something about that story of like Mary and Joseph being in a very vulnerable position, traveling to Bethlehem. They're rejected. They can't get into the inns. There's no place for them to stay. They're kind of out on their own. It was really interesting, actually. Because I just last week did a portion out of Luke. Was that Luke 3? Where Mary and Joseph go to the temple to make sacrifices. And there's a very small phrase where it says that Mary and Joseph made sacrifices for themselves, when really the sacrifices it was mentioning, the rites of purification, were really meant just for Mary because she had gone through the thing of childbirth. But many commentators look at that and say it's a good signal that Joseph had to participate in helping deliver the baby, which would have not been a thing that Joseph would have normally have done. There would have been a midwife or something like that, but there may not have been a midwife because Joseph himself also had to go through those purity rituals that were mentioned in the passage. So they're potentially just all on their own, and they're in this likely cave with animals giving birth, but in the middle of all of that messiness is like this hope. And like we can resonate with the humanness of that.
Yeah.
And wanting to say, okay, where in the middle of my messy, uncertain life do I need hope? Yeah. Do I need Christ to show up in the middle of?
Yeah. Totally like missed expectations about life. Like, I don't know that Mary or Joseph ever had a dream that they would become pregnant in that manner.
Right.
That's the way that they would build their family.
Yep.
And if we think rationally about it, it seems so miraculous and beautiful to us now. But like you were just saying, imagine placing yourself in the story and just kind of like what crushing circumstances that must have.
Well, and I think sometimes it's hard to understand the social ostracization, the social like stigma that was probably surrounding them, because the passage doesn't say much about it. But it's fair to assume that possibly some family and friends will all go like, yeah, the Holy Spirit.
Right.
Right, Mary.
Exactly.
Joseph, like.
In a similar, like we all would.
Yeah. Well, people still do that, right? People still struggle to accept the virgin birth.
Right.
And say, oh, well, it's the Bible including this, marriage and child out of wedlock. Like, and.
Yeah, trying to spiritualize it or romanticize the reality of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That would be that. Yeah, that would even be that'd be an interesting podcast topic, talking about the like how central to Christian faith is a virginal conception.
Mm-hmm.
Let's come back.
Let's come back.
We'll put a pin in that one. It's in most of the creeds.
It is.
And it's in scripture.
Mm-hmm. It's confessed pretty staunchly.
Yeah.
So.
Okay.
Anyways.
But yeah. Anyway, so like the idea of Advent not being just a ancient biblical theme,
mm-hmm.
but about how applicable it is when you overlay those themes onto our lives.
Yeah.
And how we're waiting on God for
any number of things.
Something.
Yeah.
We're waiting, Lord. We're looking for you.
Mm-hmm.
We're watching for you. We need you. We're full of expectation for you to act on our behalf or in history,
mm-hmm.
or to do this thing. That's essentially what isn't it a large part of the spirit behind even our prayers?
Yeah.
It's like, Lord, we're waiting for, like, Lord, would you please bring healing?
Mm-hmm.
Lord, would you please move? Would you please show yourself to us?
Yeah.
Provide, whatever it is. Prayer is an Advent.
Yep.
Is an Advent practice.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think then the season then of Advent, or the celebration of Advent, is perhaps one of the most practically applicable times of the year.
Yep.
For us.
Yeah. Well, and it's because there's the holidays, like one of the things too is that like the holidays are really difficult for a lot of people. Like I feel like the older we get, the more people struggle with the holidays sometimes, because there are people who are absent, or it's a place of wishing we had like a certain family dynamic and not experiencing or having that. Mm-hmm. And good grief, it gets dark at what in the afternoon?
5 o'clock.
Yeah. I'm like, that's rough on me. Like just the sheer darkness of the whole season, and feeling like, everything kind of slows down, because particularly like if you're listening to this and you're not getting snow in the winter, I don't know. I feel jealous. You. Yeah, mm-hmm. God bless you. Bless your heart. But up here,
because we're getting crushed over here.
We just had a big snowstorm, and like it just slows you down. You just can't do as much. Things close down. Like you're just not as active. There's this whole kind of like stopping that happens in the middle of winter, and this anticipation for spring and for renewal and all of that, but that can't come without Christ coming.
Yeah. So, a question for your own application of Advent and waiting on God, and like looking to the future. What would you say if you had to like pinpoint 1 or 2 points in your life where you can remember like that you were actively looking, watching, waiting, needing, and expecting God to do a miracle or show up or provide, and you could like even just feel in your soul this sense of like, I am just waiting in faith, hoping in faith.
Yeah. Honestly, the most recent one that comes to my mind, and probably one of the bigger ones, was end of 2020, the church I was a part of closed because we were a church plant in Chicago, and we closed. Like we found we made the decision to close the church plant on like December, like right about now, I think. It was like early, it was like the first or second week of December, 2020. We were just a small church plant at that point. We were struggling. We'd been going on for several years, and COVID had really just gave us like the last 1-2 punch. And our last Sunday service was held over Zoom in my apartment. It was a miserable way to end a church. And I it was the Sunday before Christmas Eve. So I think Christmas Eve was like on a Tuesday or something like that. So it was like that Sunday. So we packed up all the stuff that we had left over from that little Zoom live stream Sunday service. I packed up all of my stuff because I didn't have it was too short of a time for me to really find gainful employment in Chicago. Less than a month's notice. And I could have like gone and worked at Starbucks or something like that, but I wasn't even sure I wanted to stay in Chicago long term. So, I was fortunate enough to be able to go back to my parents. So how old was I? 31. I packed up all of my stuff and I got home like Christmas Eve or something like that. I'm back at my home church. All my stuff's in boxes, and I'm living in one of my brother's rooms while he's away at college because my room's been repurposed to something else. And I have no idea where I'm going to go, what I'm going to do. Where will I be a pastor? Will I be a pastor? Like all of those questions were like really big, and I had no idea what was going to happen. And that was like a 6-month, it was like a solid 6-month job search experience where I was pretty dedicated to wanting to come back into ministry, but was really struggling to find a church where I felt like I could be. It was just very, very difficult. And, and I'm just like, I think it wasn't until I had conversations with people, had a conversation with someone who was a local pastor, trying to just network and make connections. And he was a good guy. But he was like, have you considered maybe you just need to be a fantastic lay person, like be a lay leader, be an elder, maybe you need to be willing to let go of ministry as like a thing. And that was a really tough question to wrestle with because I felt do feel very called to ministry. But, yeah, I think by the time I finally interviewed with you and interviewed for the position here, I was like, all right, I got one more like month or something like that. And then I'm getting a job doing something. I'll still keep doing the job search, but I'll stop doing like full-time job hunting and other things. I'm going to start working elsewhere. And then, because I had enough of a, severance, and living with my parents allowed me to kind of just focus full-time on job hunting. I'd wake up and put out like 4 or 5 resumes and cover letters a day and hear back from one, maybe. It was abysmal. So, yeah.
What were some of the things that if you recall, like the relational dynamic between you and the Lord during that time? Like, were there specific things like in your prayer life that you were saying to him, asking him, he was saying to you, or that you felt or sensed him saying to you? But like, what was it like? What was it like in the waiting?
Freaking tough.
Yeah.
It was really tough because I did a lot of wrestling because I was getting to a point. I actually was having I was struggling with a little bit of doubt in my faith. And I was just like, where is all of this coming from? And I talked with a friend, and I read a really good book, and I was just like, I became convicted that I actually wasn't having any significant faith doubt. I just was not happy with the way my life was working out. And I wanted to jump ship and live life without concerning myself about what God wanted for me, and be able to just live my life without worrying about consequences or morality or my calling or anything like that, because it just would have been easier. So there was this really deep wrestling that was going on in my soul of like, man, it would be way easier to just do it my way. And like it came out in me saying, well, maybe I want to not, maybe I don't know about all this Christianity stuff. And I had to sit, I was like, where did all that come from? Out of the middle of nowhere. Not something I regularly experience. And with some deep heart searching, and I was like, this isn't actually doubt. It's not actually a concern with my faith. It's a rebellion of my heart over the circumstances I find myself in. You know, and I had to repent of that and like resubmit myself to God's will and his timing and all of that.
Yeah.
That was really tough.
Yeah.
But it was also a season where there was a lot of, I had to give God a lot of, I had to let go of a lot of like, of what was and what used to be. And then a lot of just, being willing to say yes to what was next. And I didn't know what that was going to be. Because like hunting for a pastoral position can take 6 months to a year, you know, and that's a long time to be looking for a job. So, I was at that time, I was also reading, a little bit of Jordan Peterson in his second book. Jordan Peterson, like, I have complicated thoughts about. He's not like, I'm not referencing him here as like some sort of Christian hero or something like that. So don't misconstrue my.
Still not completely clear if he's Christian.
Yeah. So don't misconstrue my quoting of him as like some sort of carte blanche endorsement of everything he says. But he has his idea of like chaos is typically ascribed as a really negative thing when we have chaos. But he pointed out, he's like, well, chaos is actually just potential. It's when you have order or structure that's been destroyed, you have a lot of chaos. And in that chaos is the opportunity for something new. And I immediately saw how that is like, it's a very biblical idea. God created out of chaos, he created order. And there were things that were God both raised things up and he destroyed things. There was always this cycle. And I was just like, what my life had been up to then in Chicago and how I thought my pastoral life and where I was going to live was all came crushing down. And I was left with like a lot of chaos. But then I had to sit in the hopefulness of waiting for that potential opportunity that represented, and just being a lot of like, I went on a lot of walks, a lot of prayer walks with the Lord, and just saying like, what's next, and just trying to be patient.
Yeah, I think there is a lot to be said about what happens in the waiting. Because there is just like a multiplicity of directions that the waiting can take you.
Yeah.
The waiting can take you into some deep, dark waters.
Yeah.
You know, even to the point, like you said, of like, do I even want to believe this?
Do I want to do this?
Do I want to do this?
Right.
I'm waiting for this, but do I want? Like, that could be a dark place.
It was very dark. It
Yeah.
was very, very dark. I had to have some friends who really helped me walk out of that.
Yeah. But then, you know, the waiting can also, in different types of waiting or different types of seasons, there, you know, it can do the opposite.
Yeah.
can send you in a different direction.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's not. I think we would be wise. The church would be wise to recognize the reality and the tendency of both of those things, or both of those patterns in people. That in the waiting, the waiting can be extraordinarily difficult, obviously, but it can bring we have to address what happens in the waiting, not just that we're waiting.
Right.
That's where we minister to people, is in the waiting.
Yeah. Because out of that season came there was a lot of good things that came out of that. It was super uncomfortable, but the ability to I felt like there was a season where the Lord was helping me understand the past and everything that I was coming out of. And then there was a lot of wrestling with him in, am I willing to go where he's leading me into the future? And then it was honestly just faith building. And so it was a lot of hills and valleys, and it was good for my soul. I wouldn't have chosen to have done it though. If someone could have said Luke, you want to sign up for this season of waiting? No, I'd rather have it now.
Yeah. No, I'm good. Yeah. None of us wants to wait for those things. Yeah. But yeah, what happens in the waiting is I think where the discussion really is. How do you wait? Almost like, how we can talk, we talk about maybe there's it's a really preachable thing to talk about how to suffer well, because suffering is such a universal human experience that it kind of demands that pastors and preachers bring some context to it from the pulpit. And I feel like the same in when you're talking about, or when people are in the season of waiting, is how do we wait well? Or how do we wait for the Lord?
Yeah.
And that could be, how do we wait for the next job? How do we wait for a sense of calling? How do we wait for a child? How do we wait for a loved one who doesn't know the Lord? How do we wait for provision, or how do we wait for healing? How do we wait well?
Yeah.
What might it look like to wait poorly? How do I know whether or not what I'm doing in this season of waiting that I'm experiencing is a good thing or a bad thing or a neutral thing or whatever? But yeah, that must have been really, I can only imagine. Well, I guess I can't only imagine. I've been a part of the closing of a church before. But not quite the same thing as you experience. But I can imagine, if we had to make the decision to close Conduit.
Oh yeah.
How just painful. How painful that would be.
Yeah.
And yeah, even asking the question about what am I going to do next? Because you never imagine, at least I have not imagined. The only thing that I have imagined on the other side of Conduit is retirement.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that I'm going to retire from here. Maybe it does. Maybe it doesn't. I don't know.
Right. But you're not constantly coming up with exit plans.
Right.
Right.
I'm just and so to have that, just here it is. It's over.
Yeah.
So quickly. I can see how even just thinking about that possibility. I can see how you get to the other side of that decision and you're like, I don't know if I want to do this.
Yeah.
Again.
Right.
I don't know if I want to wade into that.
Yeah.
I don't know if I want to wait for that. I'd rather wait for something else, Lord. So.
Yeah, because I just remember having, there's like, I feel like there's two types of church planners. The ones that are like, love it and they're rock stars and they're like, they feel like their church is just going from one success to another. And then the other is discouraged church planners.
Mm-hmm.
And
mm-hmm.
I met a lot of discouraged church planters. And
mm-hmm.
man, even as you were just talking there, I was just like, oh yeah, like it was tough because some people, when we closed the church, like got it. They were just like, yeah, like get it. It's probably a wise decision. Other people were really, really upset. Are like, why would you close this church? This is such a great community. Da 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 da. It was really hard to say goodbye to my friends and my life out there, and that sucked.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm having my own personal reflection here, but that was just I wouldn't want to do that again.
Yeah.
Sure.
No, definitely not. Definitely not. Well, thanks for sharing that. I mean, because that's. I said, like, that is the stuff of Advent.
Mm-hmm.
That's an Advent story.
Oh, yeah. Like, it was, we sang, like, the part that sticks out to me the most is that song by, I think it was by King's Kaleidoscope or Sing Team, one of those churches, or one of those, kind of indie Christian bands that kind of does worship-ish music. That song "All Glory to Christ" that's set to Old Lang Syne, and that was the last song I think we sang for our church. And like at that point it was me and Matt, the other pastor, singing, so we didn't even have anybody that could really sing leading that song, and we just sang that to a little camera, and it's just like kind of a declaration of like, let this be for God's glory. We just don't know where it's going to go, and it was a very difficult season of waiting, but I just had never even put together like the fact that like that was right in. Well, I mean, it was super sad that it was right before Christmas. I was like, Christmas Eve. I remember going back to my church and people being like, "Oh, how's like your church going?" I'm like, "Oh, we closed yesterday." That was fun. But the Lord was faithful in it. And that's the story of so much of the Old Testament is people, Abraham waiting for his son Isaac, the people of Israel waiting for deliverance and then waiting in the wilderness, and God being faithful, and just how do we be with God in that waiting?
Yeah. Yeah, I was going to ask, and I mean, you had talked a little bit about it, but like what you felt like you learned most from God, about God, or whatever in the waiting. I don't know if like you've ever reflected on that. Like, what was it? What in that season did God accomplish in you that would have been next to impossible had you not had to wait like you did?
Yeah. That God is God regardless of what I want or how things work out. That like I'm to follow God not because I want the life that I want, or I want him to bless my life, or just give him or use him as like a sanctioning tool for my decisions. But that like I have to follow God when it sucks because he's God. Not because he makes me happy or
and he's in the suck.
What?
He's in the suck.
He's in the suck, right? Like he's in there. He's in the midst of that with me. And like, God is God regardless of my feelings.
Mm-hmm.
And like, not that I had not, there was different types of obstacles and hurdles and things I've experienced in life, but that was one where I was just like, I was very much, there was this part of my soul that needed to let go of following God because because he made me feel good, or because he did good things for me, or because I felt like I just was supposed to or expected to. I had to remake the decision that, no, I'm following God because he's God of the universe, and he's deserving of that, regardless of how my life works out.
Yeah, it's good stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, the practicality of Advent and waiting, and what we learn in those moments is pretty much, I should say it's pretty expansive. So we could have lots of conversation about that. Well, we hope that. Did you have any other thoughts on that, or?
No, not really. I think that's probably enough for one episode.
Yeah.
Honestly, we covered quite a bit of ground.
Right.
Yeah. Maybe in the next episode, I'll ask you where you've waited. I feel like we don't quite have enough time to ask you the similar question.
Yeah. Yeah. I definitely know that answer. But yeah, maybe we'll cover that in the next episode. Little maybe series on Advent and waiting and expectation and seeing the Lord, or waiting for the Lord to move. And hope you enjoyed today's episode. Like it, share it, subscribe to it, wherever it is that you're listening or watching it. That would be a great blessing to us. I'm noticing our view count lately is lower since we took that break.
Yeah, I think that consistency.
Yep. And so help to got to pump those numbers up. These are rookie numbers here. These are rookie numbers.
Yeah, like our other numbers were really amazing.
Yeah. But anyway, so thanks for listening. We'll catch you next time.